Episode 2. Johnathon raised his head, his eyes turned glacial. There was a look of contempt on his face, so strong that it made me back away a few steps in shock. "You weren't supposed to be home for another hour," he said, looking annoyed. "Who cares?" I shot back. "I caught you. Is that all you have to say?" I demanded. He shoved me out of the room and then followed me, shutting the door behind him. I stared at him accusingly before I reached out and slapped him hard, leaving a bright red handprint on his cheek. He barely even blinked. "It's not how I intended for you to find out," he said finally, "but it's for the best. Now I don't have to hide the affair anymore." Affair. My knees wanted to buckle. He'd been having an affair and I'd been oblivious. I'd never felt more stupid in my life. "How long?" I rasped, and he looked confused. "How long have you been having this affair?" I bit out. "It doesn't matter," he snapped. "It does to me," I said quietly, folding my arms across my chest. "6 months," he said reluctantly. Whoosh. The air escaped my lungs and I almost collapsed. 6 months. He'd been fucking Charlotte DeLuca behind my back for 6 whole months. I felt sick. He looked me in the eyes. I couldn't speak. A tear trailed down my cheek. It was all I could do to keep standing. Then he said 4 little words that upended me completely and made me feel like my life was officially over. "I want a divorce." Johnathon's point of view. I finally did it. I finally told Flair I wanted a divorce. Charlotte pressed herself against me, grinding her luscious body as she danced, her long hair loose down her shoulders, her tight designer dress leaving nothing to the imagination. She was in her element as the music played, drawing the attention of several men who gazed at me with envy. I couldn't help but grin at them. Charlotte DeLuca was mine and my face was filled with satisfaction. I couldn't help but feel a tiny pang when I thought about Flair. We had been married for 3 years and I could have been a bit kinder about how she discovered I'd been cheating. Initially, I had resisted Charlotte's advances, but as we spent more and more time together, it got harder to say no to her. She had been persistent, and what man doesn't like a gorgeous woman pursuing him? Especially a wealthy woman who had the connections and the power to make him a billionaire? Flair was nothing compared to this woman, and although she was loyal, she couldn't lift my status or help my law firm the way Charlotte could. I was looking to the future and leaving anything that would hold me back behind. I gripped Charlotte by the waist, enjoying the feel of her waist, inhaling her sweet perfume, my mouth watering. She smirked over her shoulder, her back against me, a knowing look in her eyes. I could feel my cock hardening and hastily adjusted myself. I turned her around and kissed her, feeling her lips against mine, her little moan turning me on. I gripped her hair and sought to dominate her, leaving her panting as we pulled away. "Save it for later," Charlotte purred, her eyes glinting. "Oh, you know I will," I murmured, "but can you blame me for wanting a taste?" I breathed into her ear. She giggled, smoothing down her dress, her breasts straining against the fabric. Suddenly she paused, a look of bewilderment crossing her face. I saw her blink and her eyes squint. "That's impossible," she uttered and then pointed as I turned my head to look. "Is that Flair?" she breathed. I opened my mouth to deny it, but the woman dancing with another male on the dance floor was my soon-to-be ex-wife Flair. I inhaled sharply. She looked nothing like the Flair I was accustomed to. Instead of her traditional yoga pants and crop top, she wore a beautiful and tight-fitting black cocktail dress that enhanced her cleavage and had a split down the side. It went down to just above her knees and her legs looked long and slender. Her hair, a mixture of blonde and brown highlights, was straight and layered around her face. She was wearing makeup and her eyes looked smoky and hot. My mouth almost dropped open in shock. She looked stunning. Gorgeous. A surge of jealousy shot through me. Charlotte looked peeved. She grabbed my arm. Do you see how she's dancing with that man? She said incredulously. Look at that slut, she hissed. Flair was dancing with her back to the man, flipping her hair and looking flirtatious. I was in shock. They looked intimate, her friend Rachel dancing nearby. I glared, suddenly overcome with anger and full of suspicion. Had Flair been seeing this man while we were married? I deliberately ignored the fact I had been having an affair, feeling violent towards the man who was dancing with Flair. Charlotte glanced at me, seeing the rage on my face. I stepped towards them, shaking Charlotte's hand off of me as she followed in my wake. My steps were loud and purposeful. Flair remained oblivious until I was in her way, standing directly in front of her, my eyes fixated on her. She stopped, her body stiffening, a look of shock appearing on her face. She had been so busy dancing with her boyfriend that she hadn't taken notice of her surroundings. Charlotte stepped beside me, a small smile curving on her lips. The man Flair had been dancing with stepped beside her, a look of annoyance on his face. I eyed him. He wore a designer suit, a watch that looked like it was a genuine Rolex, and his shoes looked like genuine leather Italian. Charlotte's eyes narrowed. Well, Flair, she said mockingly, before I could speak. So much for being broken-hearted about your divorce, she added, staring hard at the man with her. Flair's eyes blazed. You have no business speaking to me at all, Charlotte, she said frostily, and it's none of your business who this man is. Who is he? I blurted out the words, breathing heavily, eyeing the man with contempt as he stared back at me amused. Is he your lover, Flair? It didn't take long for you to find somebody's shoulder to cry on, or were you already seeing each other before I asked for a divorce? I asked her tightly. She glanced at me indignantly while the man stared at me coolly. You have no business asking me that, she said bitterly. You cheated on me, remember, Johnathon? Or have you conveniently forgotten that? She asked challengingly, flipping her hair over her shoulder as Rachel calmly stepped up beside her and glowered at Charlotte. I clenched my hands into fists. Answer the question, I barked out. Who are you? I asked the man. He gave me a cold smile. Frankly, it's none of your damn business who I am to Flair, he said blithely. A dog like you should know its place, he added with disdain. Charlotte gaped. How dare you speak to my fiancé like that, she seethed. Do you have any idea who I am? She spat. The man raked his gaze over her. Charlotte DeLuca, he said, sounding bored, a spoilt heiress who needs to be put firmly over her father's knee and given a thorough spanking. Charlotte's mouth dropped open. How dare you, she shrieked. I can destroy you with one word, she threatened. I'd like to see you try, the man yawned, sounding unimpressed. Charlotte's face turned an unbecoming red. Flair turned glacial eyes on me. Hurry up and send me the divorce papers, Johnathon, she said coldly. Or shall I have them drawn up? I'll send them, I snarled. You didn't even have the decency to wait until they were signed before moving on, did you? Full story is available on shelfofnovels.com. Click the link in the comment section to get it free.